Girls like you don't make it to college. Those words still echo in my mind when I close my eyes at night. It's been 25 years, but I can still see Ms. Harrison's face, lips pursed, eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with certainty as she delivered what she thought was my life sentence. I was 13, sitting in the third row of my 8th grade classroom, clutching my state assessment test with trembling hands. The big red C burned into the corner of the page felt like a brand, mocking me as average at best. Not that a C was terrible, but in my household where excellence was the only currency that mattered, it might as well have been an F. Destiny, can you stay after class? Miss Harrison had called out as the bell rang. The way she said my name always bothered me, like it was an ironic joke rather than something my mother had chosen with hope and faith. The other students filed out, a few glancing back with those looks that said they were glad it wasn't them. My friend Tamika hesitated at the door, but I waved her on. This wasn't her battle. When the room emptied, Ms. Harrison beckoned me to her desk. She was a tall woman with perfect posture, her salt and pepper hair always pulled back into a severe bun. She'd been teaching at Lincoln Middle School for 20 years, and rumor had it, she'd never smiled once. "Do you know why I asked you to stay behind?" she asked, folding her hands on her desk. "Because of my test score?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "Partially." She picked up my test paper, holding it like it was something unpleasant. "But more importantly, because I'm concerned about your attitude." My attitude? I'd sat quietly in her class all year, turned in most assignments on time, and raised my hand occasionally. I wasn't a troublemaker. "I don't understand, Ms. Harrison." "You've been daydreaming in my class, Destiny, doodling in your notebook instead of taking notes. And now this." She tapped the C with her perfectly manicured nail. "You have potential, but you're wasting it." I swallowed hard. "I'll try harder next time." "That's what you said after the last test." She sighed, a sound so heavy with disappointment it made my shoulders slump. "Destiny, I've been teaching a long time. I can spot patterns. Some students have what it takes and some need to be realistic about their futures." I remember how the classroom suddenly felt colder, how the cheerful educational posters on the walls, Einstein with his tongue out, a cat hanging from a branch with "Hang in there" printed below, seemed to mock me. "What do you mean?" She leaned forward. "College isn't for everyone, and that's okay. There are plenty of respectable careers that don't require higher education." My throat tightened. College had been my dream since I was 7, when my grandma had taken me to visit Howard University during a trip to D.C. I'd walked across that yard, watched students with books and bright futures, and decided that would be me someday. "But I want to go to college," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm going to be a doctor." Miss Harrison's expression softened into something worse than sternness. Pity. "Destiny, girls like you don't make it to college." She gestured vaguely at all of me. "Especially not medical school. That requires exceptional grades, discipline, and, certain advantages." Girls like me. I knew exactly what she meant. Girls from Oakwood Gardens, the housing project where I lived with my mother and 2 younger brothers. Girls whose mothers worked double shifts as nursing assistants. Girls who wore the same 3 outfits in rotation. Girls with brown skin and kinky hair who didn't have connections or legacy status. "I have discipline," I said, my voice stronger now, fed by a flame that had started to burn in my chest. "And I can get better grades." "Of course you can improve," she said with that same pitying smile, But I think we need to be realistic. Your mother? Is she still working at Memorial Hospital? Yes. My mother had been a certified nursing assistant. For 12 years, she worked harder than anyone I knew. That's a fine career. Practical. Necessary. Miss Harrison nodded approvingly. Perhaps you should consider something similar. Vocational schools have excellent programs. The dismissal bell rang then, signaling the end of the school day. Miss Harrison glanced at the clock. Think about what I've said, Destiny. It's important to have dreams, but they should be attainable ones. I walked out of that classroom with my test clutched in my hand, the paper crumpling in my grip. I didn't cry. Not then. I was too numb, too shocked by the casual way she had tried to rewrite my future. The hallway was crowded with students rushing to freedom, slamming lockers, making plans for the weekend. I moved through them like a ghost, barely registering Tamika calling my name. "Hey, what happened?" she asked, falling into step beside me. Was Harrison being a witch again? I couldn't tell her, couldn't form the words, because saying them out loud might make them real, might give them power. So I just shook my head and mumbled something about needing to study harder. But that night, alone in the bedroom I shared with my brothers when they were at my dad's, I finally let the tears come. I cried until my pillow was soaked, until my throat was raw, until my eyes burned. When my mother came home at 11:30, her uniform smelling of hospital disinfectant, she found me still awake, staring at the ceiling. "Baby, what are you doing up?" She sat on the edge of my bed, her hand cool against my forehead. "You sick?" I shook my head, but fresh tears betrayed me. "Destiny Renee Wilson, you tell me what's wrong right now." Her voice was firm but gentle, the voice that had guided me through every heartbreak and disappointment. So I told her. Every word Miss Harrison had said, every implication in her tone, every dream she had tried to snatch away. I expected my mother to be angry, to march down to the school the next day and demand an apology. That's what she usually did when someone wronged her children. But instead, she was quiet for a long time, stroking my hair. "Do you want to go? To college?" she finally asked. "Yes." No hesitation. "More than anything. And are you willing to work twice as hard as everyone else to get there?" "Yes." 3 times as hard?" "Yes." She nodded, her eyes shining with something fierce. "Then you will go, and you'll send Miss Harrison a graduation announcement when you do." That night, my mother and I made a plan. Every evening after dinner, 2 hours of study. No TV on weeknights. Library on Saturdays. She would pick up extra shifts to pay for a tutor in math, my weakest subject. "And baby," she said as she tucked me in, something she hadn't done in years, "remember this. There will always be people who try to put limits on you. Your job isn't to convince them they're wrong. Your job is to prove them wrong." The next day at school, I walked into Miss Harrison's class with my head high. She barely glanced at me, already writing the day's assignment on the board. But something had changed. Not in her, in me. Her words still hurt, still echoed, but they no longer defined my possibilities. That semester became a turning point. I studied until my eyes burned, until the numbers and formulas and historical dates were etched into my brain. I raised my hand in every class, answered questions even when I wasn't sure, stayed after for help. My grades climbed from C's to B's, then to A's. Not in everything. Math remained a struggle, but enough to raise my GPA significantly. I joined the science club, volunteered at the hospital where my mother worked, started researching colleges and scholarships. Miss Harrison noticed. I could tell by the way her eyebrows would lift slightly when I turned in work, the way she'd pause a beat longer when calling on me. But she never acknowledged the change directly, never offered encouragement or praise. Then came the district-wide science fair in April. Students from all the middle schools in the county would compete, with judges from the high schools and local colleges. The top 3 projects would receive medals, and the first-place winner would get a special award, a summer program at the State University's Science Department. I spent weeks on my project, an examination of how different plants could filter water contaminants. My mother helped me gather supplies. My younger brothers reluctantly assisted with watering schedules, and Tamika's father, who worked as a lab technician, let me borrow some equipment. The night before the fair, I stayed up past midnight making sure everything was perfect. My display board was neat and colorful, my research thorough, my conclusions supported by data. I practiced my presentation until I could recite it in my sleep. The day of the fair, the school gymnasium was transformed into a showcase of young scientific minds. Tables lined the space in neat rows, each bearing the fruits of weeks of labor. I set up my station between a volcano model, really, in 8th grade, and a project about battery life. The judges moved through the room with clipboards, asking questions, taking notes. When they reached my table, I took a deep breath and launched into my presentation, explaining how certain plants could be used in developing countries to create low-cost water filtration systems. One judge, a woman with kind eyes and a Howard University pin on her lapel, asked detailed questions about my methodology. Another, a stern-looking man, probed for weaknesses in my conclusions. I answered each query confidently, drawing on all the extra research I'd done. As they moved on, I caught sight of Miss Harrison standing at the back of the gym, watching. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away, her expression unreadable. The judging took hours. By the time the principal stepped up to the microphone to announce the winners, my feet ached from standing and my voice was hoarse from repeating my presentation to curious parents and students. 3rd place, the principal announced, goes to Jacob Miller for his project on solar energy. Polite applause as Jacob, a red-haired boy from my grade, received his bronze medal. 2nd place goes to Aisha Patel for her research on music's effect on plant growth. More applause. My heart hammered in my chest. I hadn't allowed myself to hope for a win, but now possibility hummed through me like electricity. And 1st place, the principal paused for effect, goes to Destiny Wilson for her innovative work on plant-based water filtration. The gymnasium erupted in applause. Tamika squealed beside me, pushing me forward. My legs felt wooden as I walked, to the front, where the principal draped a gold medal around my neck and handed me a certificate for the summer program. "Congratulations, Destiny," she said warmly. "Your project showed exceptional scientific thinking and real-world application." As I turned to face the crowd, metal gleaming against my blue dress, I saw my mother at the back of the room, clapping so hard it looked like she might take flight. Beside her, my brothers were jumping up and down, though I suspected they were, more excited about the pizza my mom had promised than my scientific achievement. And there was Miss Harrison, her face a complex mix of surprise and something else. Discomfort, perhaps. Recognition. Our eyes met again, and this time she didn't look away. I lifted my chin slightly, a small gesture that said what I couldn't. Voice. "I am not who you think I am. The summer program changed everything. For 6 weeks, I worked alongside high school students and college mentors in real laboratories, conducting experiments, learning techniques, discovering a world where curiosity was currency and knowledge was power. Dr. Helene Foster, the program director, took a special interest in me. She was the first black female scientist I'd ever met in person, with a PhD in biochemistry and a laugh that filled the room. "You've got a good mind, Destiny," she told me one afternoon as we calibrated microscopes. "Sharp, analytical, but also creative. That's rare." I soaked up her words like a plant reaching for sunlight after too long in shade. "My teacher doesn't think I'll make it to college," I confessed, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Dr. Foster's hand stilled. "And what do you think?" "I know I will," I said. "My mom and I have a plan." She nodded approvingly. "Plans are good, but sometimes life offers unexpected paths to the same destination." She adjusted the microscope lens. "Have you heard of the Young Scholars Program?" I shook my head. "It's a competitive scholarship program for promising students from underserved communities. Full ride to any state university, plus mentorship and internship opportunities." She looked at me directly. "The application period opens in September. I think you should apply." "But I'm only going into 9th grade," I said, stunned. "Isn't that for high school seniors?" "The early identification track is for younger students. You'd be guaranteed the scholarship if you maintain a 3.8 GPA through high school." She smiled. "Based on what I've seen this summer, that shouldn't be a problem for you." That evening, I raced home to tell my mother the news. Our small apartment, usually a place where dreams felt constrained by the narrow walls and thin ceilings, suddenly seemed filled with possibility. We stayed up late, researching the program on our ancient desktop computer, its fan whirring loudly as if excited too. The requirements were stringent: excellent grades, teacher recommendations, community service, a personal essay, and an interview. "You can do this," my mother said, her faith unwavering. "Every single bit of it." When September came, I threw myself into the application with the same determination I'd brought to my science project. I drafted and redrafted my essay, detailing my passion for medicine and my desire to bring healthcare back to communities like mine. I listed my volunteer hours at the hospital, my science fair win, my perfect attendance. For teacher recommendations, I asked Mr. Daniels, my science teacher who had encouraged my project, and Ms. Lopez, my English teacher who praised my writing. I deliberately didn't ask Ms. Harrison, though as my homeroom teacher she would be notified, of my application. The interview was scheduled for October at the university campus downtown. My mother took the day off work, a rare occurrence that underscored the importance of the opportunity. She helped me pick out my outfit, a modest navy blue dress, sensible shoes, and the small pearl earrings my grandmother had given me for my 13th birthday. "Remember," she said as we rode the bus to the campus, "they're lucky to have you applying, not the other way around." The university buildings loomed large and imposing, their brick facades and tall columns speaking of tradition and prestige. We followed the signs to the administration building, where other nervous teenagers and their parents waited in a grand hallway, lined with portraits of stern-looking former presidents and deans. All white men, I noticed. When my name was called, I squared my shoulders and followed an assistant into a conference room, where 3 people sat behind a long table: an older white man with bushy eyebrows, a middle-aged Asian woman with a kind smile, and to my surprise and delight, Dr. Foster. "Destiny," she greeted me warmly. "I'm so pleased you applied. These are my colleagues, Dr. Chen and Dean Williams." The interview began formally enough, with questions about my academic interests and extracurricular activities. But soon it evolved into a deeper conversation about why I wanted to become a doctor, what challenges I foresaw, how I plan to overcome them. Healthcare disparities in underserved communities are a particular interest of mine, I said, drawing on articles I'd read and observations from my mother's work. I've seen how lack of access affects families like mine. Dr. Chen nodded encouragingly. And how would you address those disparities as a physician? By practicing in those communities, I answered without hesitation. By understanding the specific needs and barriers patients face. By being someone they can trust, who looks like them and shares their experiences. Dean Williams's bushy eyebrows rose slightly. Ambitious goals for someone so young. Yes, sir, I agreed, but necessary ones. The interview lasted 45 minutes, though it felt both longer and shorter somehow. When it ended, Dr. Foster walked me to the door. You did wonderfully, she whispered. We'll be in touch soon. My mother was waiting in the hallway, anxiety etched on her face until she saw my smile. It went well? She asked, standing quickly. I think so, I said, suddenly exhausted but buzzing with adrenaline. Dr. Foster was there. That's a good sign, my mother said, squeezing my hand. A very good sign. The next 6 weeks were torture. Every day I checked the mail, rushed home from school to see if there was a message on our answering machine, jumped whenever the phone rang. My grades didn't slip. I wouldn't allow that. But my focus certainly did. Then, one Tuesday in December, I came home to find my mother sitting at our small kitchen table, a large envelope in front of her. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and for a terrible moment I thought it was bad news. Mom? She looked up and I realized she'd been crying happy tears. It came, she said simply, pushing the envelope toward me. With trembling fingers I opened it. Dear Destiny Wilson, I read aloud. We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for the early identification track of the Young Scholars Program. I couldn't read further. My vision blurred with tears, and a sound between a sob and a laugh escaped me. My mother was on her feet, wrapping me in a hug so tight I could barely breathe. You did it, she whispered fiercely. You did it. But we both knew this was just the beginning. The scholarship came with conditions. Maintain that 3.8 GPA through high school, complete 40 hours of community service annually, attend monthly mentoring sessions, participate in summer enrichment programs. It would be 4 years of hard work, of balancing school and service and family responsibilities. 4 years of proving I deserved this opportunity. 4 years of proving Ms. Harrison wrong. The day after winter break, I returned to Lincoln Middle, school with a lightness in my step that hadn't been there before. The scholarship wasn't public knowledge yet. The official announcement would come in the spring. But I carried the secret like a talisman. During homeroom, Ms. Harrison distributed permission slips for an upcoming field trip. When she reached my desk, she paused. I received an interesting email over the break, Destiny, she said, her voice low enough that only I could hear. From the university. My heart skipped. The scholarship committee would have contacted all my teachers as part of the final verification process. Oh, I kept my voice neutral, though inside I was churning with emotions. Pride, vindication, lingering hurt. They've requested a reference letter. Her lips pursed slightly. For a scholarship program. I met her gaze steadily. Yes, Ms. Harrison. She seemed to be waiting for more. An explanation, perhaps, or an apology for not asking her. Directly for a recommendation. I offered neither. After a moment, she continued. I'll be submitting it by the end of the week. They were quite impressed with your application. Thank you, I said simply. She moved on to the next desk, but I noticed a new tension in her shoulders, a slight hurry in her movements. The following Monday, the principal made an announcement during morning assembly that sent a ripple of whispers through the auditorium. It gives me great pleasure to announce that one of our own 8th graders, Destiny Wilson, has been selected for the prestigious Young Scholars Program at the State University. This full scholarship is awarded to only 5 students statewide each year, and Destiny is the first from Lincoln to receive this honor. Applause erupted, with Tamika whistling, loudly beside me. I felt my cheeks warm as the principal motioned for me to stand. Destiny will be guaranteed a full ride to university upon successful completion of high school, along with mentorship and internship opportunities. Let's give her a round of applause for this outstanding achievement. The cheers grew louder. I risked a glance at the teachers' section and found Ms. Harrison watching me. Her face was composed, her applause polite but reserved. Our eyes met, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw regret flicker across her features before she looked away. Later that day, she called me to her desk after class again. An echo of that conversation 8 months earlier that had both wounded and galvanized me. "Congratulations on your scholarship," she said, arranging papers on her desk rather than looking at me directly. "It's quite an achievement." "Thank you, Ms. Harrison." A pause stretched between us, filled with unspoken words. "I submitted my reference letter on Friday," she finally continued. "I highlighted your improvement this year, your dedication to your studies." I nodded, unsure what she wanted from me. "Destiny." She finally met my eyes. "I owe you an apology." The words hung in the air, unexpected and weighty. I had imagined this moment, daydreamed about it during long study sessions, rehearsed responses that ranged from gracious to cutting. But now that it was happening, I found myself speechless. "What I said to you last spring was inappropriate and unprofessional," she continued when I didn't respond. "More importantly, it was wrong. You've proven that with your hard work and this scholarship." I swallowed, trying to find my voice. "You said girls like me don't make it to college." She flinched slightly, hearing her own words reflected back. "I did. And I was wrong? Why?" The question came out before I could stop it. "Why did you say that to me?" Ms. Harrison sighed, a sound so heavy with something, regret, shame, that it seemed to physically deflate her. "That's not an excuse. You're owed," she said quietly, "but perhaps an explanation. I've been teaching for 20 years, and I've seen many bright students start with big dreams, only to have them crushed by circumstances. Financial hardship, family obligations, systemic barriers. I thought..." She paused. "I thought I was being realistic, preparing you for disappointment. By becoming the disappointment." The words weren't angry, just honest. She nodded slowly. "It was wrong of me, and I'm sorry." I stood there, 13 years old, but feeling much older, carrying the weight of expectations, those placed upon me and those denied me. "I accept your apology," I said finally, because my mother had raised me to be gracious. "But I won't forget what you said." "I wouldn't expect you to." She straightened some papers on her desk. "Sometimes the greatest motivation comes from proving someone wrong. I just wish it hadn't been me you had to prove wrong." As I turned to leave, she added, "Destiny, I have no doubt you'll make an excellent doctor someday." The words should have felt vindicating, healing even. But they landed differently than I expected, not as the validation I'd once craved, but simply as one person's revised opinion. Important, but no longer defining, because somewhere along the way, between the late-night study sessions and the science fair victory and the scholarship interview, I'd stopped needing Ms. Harrison's approval. I'd found something more valuable, my own certainty. High school brought new challenges, new teachers, new friends. The scholarship program connected me with mentors and opportunities I would never have had otherwise. I maintained my GPA, completed my service hours, attended summer research programs at the university. Ms. Harrison and I never spoke again after I left Lincoln Middle School. But every achievement, every milestone, I thought of her words, not with bitterness, but as a reminder of how easily others can underestimate you if you let them. The day I received my acceptance letter to medical school, not just any medical school, but Johns Hopkins, I found myself thinking of her again, wondering if she ever reflected on that conversation, if she'd learned to see potential rather than limitations in her students. I hope she did. I hope my story became one she told herself on days when she doubted the difference a teacher could make. For better or worse, 25 years have passed since that day in her classroom. I'm now Dr. Destiny Wilson, a pediatrician with my own practice in an underserved neighborhood, not unlike the one where I grew up. My waiting room is filled with children who look like I did, whose parents work as hard as my mother did, who deserve the same chance to pursue their dreams. And here's the strangest part of my story, the part that feels like life coming full circle in ways you could never predict. Last month, a new patient came in, a 7-year-old girl with asthma, accompanied by her grandmother. The girl was shy, but curious, her eyes taking in every detail of my office, with its colorful walls and science posters. The grandmother looked familiar, but I couldn't place her until I saw the name on the chart. Harper, Margaret Harper. Miss Harrison had married, changed her last name, aged into a grandmother caring for her daughter's child, while the mother worked. She didn't recognize me at first. Why would she? The gangly 13-year-old with something to prove had become a confident physician with gray starting to streak her braids. But when I introduced myself, her eyes widened in recognition. "Dr. Wilson," she said slowly. "Destiny Wilson." I nodded, watching emotions play across her face. Surprise, remembrance, and something like wonder. "My granddaughter, Zoe," she said, her hand on the girl's shoulder. "She's been having trouble breathing, especially at night. I conducted the examination, diagnosed moderate asthma, prescribed medications, and created a management plan." Throughout, I was acutely aware of Ms. Harrison, Mrs. Harper now, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. As I finished, explaining the treatment to them, Zoe looked up at me with those earnest eyes children have. "Can I be a doctor too when I grow up?" Before I could answer, Mrs. Harper said quietly, "You can be anything you set your mind to, Zoe. Absolutely anything." Our eyes met over the child's head, and in that moment, I knew she was thinking of the same conversation I was, of limitations imposed and overcome, of words that bound and heal. "Your grandmother is right," I told Zoe, smiling. "And if that's what you want, I'd be happy to tell you all about what doctors do. Maybe you can shadow me for a day when you're a little older." After the appointment, as Zoe explored the children's corner of my waiting room, Mrs. Harper lingered at the reception desk. "You did it," she said simply. "Everything you said you would." "I did. I think about you sometimes," she admitted. "About what I said to you. It was the worst kind of teaching. I could have agreed, could have let her sit with that discomfort. Instead, I found myself saying, 'It taught me something, though, that other people's expectations don't define my capabilities.'" She nodded slowly. I learned something too. To never underestimate what a determined young person can achieve. She glanced at her granddaughter. Zoe's mother, my daughter, is struggling, working 2 jobs, dealing with an absent father. Circumstances not so different from yours at that age. I understood then why she'd brought Zoe to my practice, in a neighborhood not convenient to where they lived. It wasn't coincidence. She'd sought me out. Zoe's bright, Mrs. Harper continued, curious about everything. But her school, they're not nurturing that spark. They see a poor black girl and lower their expectations. You don't want her to experience what I did, I realized. No. Her eyes, older now but still sharp, met mine directly. I was hoping perhaps you could mentor her, be the kind of influence I failed to be for you. The request surprised me. The humility of it, the tacit acknowledgement of her past failure, the trust it implied. I'd be honored, I said after a moment. We have a program here for middle schoolers interested in healthcare. Zoe would be welcome, when she's old enough. Relief softened her features. Thank you. As they were leaving, Zoe turned back to wave at me, her smile wide and hopeful. In her face, I saw my younger self, full of dreams that others might dismiss, but that burned, bright nonetheless. Dr. Wilson? Mrs. Harper paused at the door. You proved me wrong in the best possible way. I smiled. Sometimes that's the greatest gift we can give someone, the chance to revise their beliefs. After they left, I stood in my office, surrounded by my diplomas and certifications, thinking about the long path from that 8th grade classroom to here, about how words can wound but don't have to define us, about how the most powerful response to "you can't" is not argument, but achievement. If you've ever had someone underestimate you, if you've ever been told your dreams were too big or your background too limiting, I hope my story reminds you that other people's expectations are just that, theirs. They don't have to become yours. And if you're in a position to influence young minds, as a teacher, parent, mentor, or friend, remember the power your words carry. They can limit or liberate. They can discourage or inspire. Choose carefully. Have you ever had someone underestimate you? Or have you been the person who judged too quickly, only to be proven gloriously wrong? I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments. Or pass this along to someone who needs a reminder that they are not defined by others' perceptions. Because the most satisfying success isn't just achieving your dreams. It's achieving them when someone said, "You couldn't."